crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I'm here with a card using Neat and Tangled products. I am stamping the little kids from the Better Together stamp set, and the new Neat and Tangles Little Tangles challenge is to use masking. So today I'm going to talk about how you can create masks with your ScanNCut. Of course, you could just mask by cutting these out on masking paper with fussy cutting, but for those who like the border look of a matching coordinating die cut, or for those who don't enjoy fussy cutting, I thought it would be fun to show you how to do it on the ScanNCut. So I'm going to stamp them in some Copic safe ink because in the future I'll probably color these guys with some Copic markers. However, I'm not actually using those stamped images in the card. They're going to be saved for later. What I'm going to do is put them through my ScanNCut. It's going to cut them out, and if you're not sure how to use a ScanNCut, I have a whole separate video on that I will link in the video description, and it gives you some tips and tricks. So I've cut them out. But in order to create the mask, and I could use them for masks, but that's kind of a waste because they're stamped, so I can take a piece of plain cardstock, put it in the same exact spot, and without canceling anything on my ScanNCut, once it's cut I let it hold on to the data for a second, and I send it back through. So normally after you're finished cutting, you could hit home and it says, do you want to delete the patterns? Well, before I do that, I'm going to just send it through and cut it a second time. I'm not going to hit the home button yet. I'm just going to load up my mat with this plain cardstock and hit cut again, and it's going to cut the same exact things, the same exact outlines here on a new piece of cardstock, and then I can use those as my masks. Now I said if it's easier, stamp, cut them out, use the stamped images as your masks. It doesn't really waste any more resources. But if you wanted to just have plain masks for any reason, that would be the way to do it. Just send it through the machine a second time before deleting the data. And make sure that your piece of paper is in about the same spot that it was previously. So I've stamped the little kid again. This time I have stamped it in the middle of a piece of cardstock, and I'm taking that cut out piece and I'm laying it around her so that I know exactly where to put my mask. By making sure that she's framed in that shape even on all sides, it's going to be a lot easier to lay down the mask. Without that frame, I might put it off too much to the left or right. So I'm just going to fit it in like a puzzle piece and then pull that off. I'm using the Frog Delicate Surface tape. That's the yellow tape that you see. And then I was using some removable adhesive from EK Success, but honestly, I didn't wind up liking it in the end. I felt that it was a little too sticky and it kind of pulled up my paper. So I wouldn't recommend that removable adhesive, but I did attach my mask with removable adhesive. You might want to try cutting on masking paper instead. So instead of putting down a piece of cardstock and putting it through your ScanNCut, you could have put down a piece of masking paper. Masking paper is a bit more expensive, and so I wanted to try this removable adhesive idea. So now that I have my little kid masked off, I'm ready to do some stamping. And the first time I did this, I did it in my MISTI because I'm so used to dye inks not stamping perfect on these more solid images the first time. However, I'm actually using Distress Oxide ink for solid stamping. And I find that it is way better at solid stamping than most of the other inks in my collection. In fact, I am able to use a stamp block, get it nice and juicy, even though these are really thick script here, stamp it down one time, and it's almost perfect every single time. I would say a majority of them are perfect. Very occasionally, I will get one that's a little imperfect. And I think that those were mostly from if I had just, so here I have my Lawn Fawn stamp chamois and I'm cleaning them off. If the stamp's a little bit wet and then you press it into the Oxide inks, you will get a little bit of it beating up and it won't present a perfect image. So you'll want to keep your stamp chamois a little drier so that your stamps aren't too wet. But as you can see, I am switching inks really quickly, and that would be much harder to do with dye inks. A lot of times to clean them off perfectly takes more than a simple swipe. But because the Distress Oxide inks are reactive with water, they clean off your blocks, they clean off your stamps really, really easily. And so I can switch colors and use the same Hugs and Hello from the Better Together stamp set and stamp in all these different colors. I went from a dark purple to a really light green, from the, I believe it's the Wilted Violet to the Twisted Citron, and it wasn't a problem at all. I found that actually the inks came off even easily with just swiping it onto a piece of dry paper. They were very, very easy to clean off my stamps. And so they're kind of a preference for me. Now you could use pigment inks, and they would act similarly in terms of giving a good impression on a thicker image like this. However, I find they take a really long time to dry. They're easy to smear. Some of them I find never dry. I've had a card that I made and I still had it a year later and the ink still smeared on my fingers. So I much, much, much prefer the Distress Oxide inks because they give you all the benefits of stamping with a vibrant, bright, awesome pigment ink in solid stamping, yet they dry much more quickly. They're really easy to clean. And I don't know, I just really can't say enough about how much I prefer them for solid stamping. And now that there are 24 colors, I feel like I have a really good range of colors. The second set of Distress Oxide inks really kind of hit home as a palette that I love. As I'm doing this stamping here in the background, I'm trying to make sure that I don't stamp only hellos next to each other, only hugs. So I'm trying to spread out the hello and the hugs, both sentiments from Better Together. And I'm trying to spread out the colors. So, as you kind of see, there's like a zigzag pattern of the greens there. And I try to spread them out, not stamp anything too close together. But the Miss You sentiment, which is also from the Better Together stamp set, all these stamps are from that stamp set, I stamped that in the black soot ink. It's not a pure black. However, it's pretty close, and I really enjoy the way that they stamp. If I were just stamping with the black ink, I'd probably go with VersaFine. But I do like how it kind of has a similar look to the other sentiments. And I'm taking this little heart also from the same stamp set and just filling in any little areas, adding a punch of color here and there, and also trying to fill some of those gaps. The Distress Oxide inks are great because you can overlap them and they kind of create like a fun little look in between. So sometimes my hello will go right into my hugs, and it's not the same with dye inks where they would like blend right together. They kind of sit on top of each other a bit, and I don't know, I really liked the way that looked as well. So the reason that I created a mask where it had a little bit of a border is because it creates a very slight halo around my kid and my stamped image here. And that just brings a little bit more attention and interest as opposed to cutting right up next to him. And it gives him a little bit of like breathing room because I'm going to use the same colors to color him as I did to stamp in the background. So I knew his little fox would look perfect in the orange, but then I'm going to try to pull in some of the other colors, specifically the green and blue, into his clothing. So I'm trying to put the marker caps out, so I hope you can see some of the colors. I am going to talk briefly about Copic coloring. I am not an expert. There are definitely some other people out there who can give you a lot of great tips, but I did want to include this because they are pretty fun images to color. Even though there's quite a bit of detail on them, there are also some really large spaces which make it a bit easier to color. So I am taking my blue markers. I'm generally starting with the lightest color, and I try to leave the area that I want lightest without very many layers, because if you continue to go over it, even with your lightest color, it can sometimes get too blended. So I really try to resist the urge to go over my highlight too many times. I try to make it just once, so sometimes the first time I lay down some color, I don't even cover the areas that will eventually be the lightest. I leave them white until I've gone in with my medium color. So you're seeing that here with the greens, is the bottom of the shirt, which is going to be the lightest, is I'm not coloring it until I've already mixed in some of my darker color. I believe I'm using G14 and YG13. With the greens, I find that you can mix the Gs and YGs pretty easily without a problem. And I'm trying to create very simple drop shadows. So where his pants and his shirt meet, the shirt would cast a little bit of a shadow on his pants, and so that's why I'm choosing to make them darker. Now, as you could see at the beginning, I created a whole series of these cards, and they the same exact method used on each one, so there was no need to show every single card. But I found that sometimes when you have all the supplies out, it's fun to create several cards. And I knew quite a few people who I'd want to send this card to, this card design, but having the little different images worked out well. So with the skin, I'm going to use E50 and E53. They're a little far apart, so what you can see there is I'm taking the light marker, the E50, and I'm touching it to the tip of the E53, and that is allowing a little bit of a blend. So if your marker colors are a little far away from each other, you can use that tip-to-tip blending tool as well. And the areas of the fox that I wanted white, I'm going to just put a touch of a really, really light gray marker like C00 just to make it not stock white and have a little bit of a shadow. When I color the hair, I don't do some of the amazing detail coloring that other people do, but I do try to add just a bit of texture by flicking in a darker color over a lighter color. And with hair, I really try not to blend out too much because then you lose the strands. So definitely keep a flicking motion and don't go over too many layers of the lighter color because then it will kind of just blend in and you'll lose that texture. And sometimes it's even helpful to heat it up in between, let it dry a little bit between when you add the flecks and the darker color and you blend it, because if it's not as wet, it doesn't blend as much and maintains a little bit more of those look of hair. So I will mount these on some black cardstock and then onto my card base. I did the same thing where I pulled the colors from the background into the cards when I colored the other kids from the Better Together stamp set as well. So that is it for my video today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you are interested in more crafting tutorials, be sure to subscribe to my channel. As I mentioned, this is for the Neat and Tangles Little Tangles Challenge, so you can head over and participate as well. It's good through the end of the month, and the challenge is to mask something. Again, you can check out that ScanNCut video for more details on how to cut with your ScanNCut if that's helpful, or use the coordinating dies. Thank you so much for watching. The products will be linked in the video description. Have an awesome day.